Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I'm going over a series of presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class. Our actual textbook for this class is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Lee Naylor. I've decided before going over that, I was going to go over another book that is free online, a PDF version, which is Professional ASP.NET MVC5 by John Galloway and others. That book, basically, some of the examples in that book go through the ASP.NET MVC3, so it's old, MvcStore. So I'm running through those first, and I am now up to Part 2 of 10. Part 2 is on controllers. Now, this text that you see right here is the same in every one of these. You know, as it says, it's a tutorial app, it's step-by-step, it's a pretty simple application, and it shows you site administration, shopping cart functionality, etc. So, the second part, Part 2 of this, will cover controllers. Now, with a traditional type of URL, you always have something on the end that looks like this, .aspx if it's an ASP.NET file, .php for a PHP file. Maybe even if it's a static file, index.html or whatever. Well, when you work with MVC types of apps, all right, as it says here on the top of the page that you can see, it basically maps URLs to server code in a different way, all right? Rather than mapping the URLs to files, they map the URLs to class methods. These classes, as mentioned, are called controllers. They go in that controller folder that we've looked at. They're responsible for handling or processing the incoming HTTP request that happens when the user types something into their browser and hits enter. All right? So they handle the user input, they retrieve and save data, they determine what's going to be sent back to the user. So they are literally the controller. That's their job. They're kind of an intermediary between the model, which typically has all the code in there to handle the database and the business rules, and the view, which is the HTML that gets passed back to the user. So it says here we're going to begin by adding a controller class that will handle URLs on the home page of the site. We'll follow the default convention and we'll call it home controller. So right mouse click in here and copy. And let's go back here. And under controllers, we already have one, so we don't have to add that. Again, when they showed that in here, that was the setup for MVC3, so we don't have to do that. All right, so we'll just skip that. And we won't worry about that code because that is the code that we have in there. We'll look at it in a minute. All right. Well, I guess they do want us to do this. So right now, this is the code. These are the system files that we'll be using. The two that are important here, two for right now that are the most important, are these two, especially the bottom one, because MVC apps typically will always use system.web.mvc. Later, when we talk about querying, we'll use the system.link file. But for now, don't even let it concern you one way or the other. All right, so let's see. Is this what we have? Morning. So we open up our main controller here, and this is what it looks like. All right, so namespace, MvcMusicStore controllers, etc. So let's take a look and see if that pretty much is the way that this looks as well. Now remember, this is set up differently because the old one is version 3. So it may look a little bit different here. Don't let that throw you one way or the other if it does. Namespace MvcMusicStore.controllers. Good start. Public class home controller : controller. This means that the home controller class inherits from a built-in class named controller, which would make sense. All right. Then we've got this public action result index. We don't have that comment there. It's no big thing. But it says return view. And then we've got an about for our about page, which isn't shown here, and an action for our contact page. Just to show you quickly what these are, notice how it says here, your application description page and your contact page. Let's just save this and run it without making any changes to it whatsoever. And let's see what comes up on our screen here. All right. Now, when I click About, see that? Your application description page. And when I click Contact, your contact page. All right. I'm just so you see it, I'm going to make a couple real simple changes here. I'm going to change this to the, oops, can't do it while the program's running. So first, the About page and the contact page. So I just made those two simple little changes there. Let's run this again. And notice now when we click on first the About link and then on the contact link, how this is going to change. So About, the About page, Contact, the contact page. So you can start to see how these things map into one another. All right. So we want to make some changes in here. We want to change that so that instead of this returning what's called an action result, it's going to return a string. And the string it's going to return is hello from home. So I'm literally just going to grab that code here, copy it to the clipboard, go back to my program, and I'm going to change this, just highlight this, and paste that back in. Again, I can't do it while the program's running. There we go. So originally this had here, it was returning an action view. And this said to return a view, basically. Now we're just going to return hello from home. Why is that important? Who cares? Well, watch what happens when we run the program with this hello from home. There's our hello from home. All right. So we created a new website, as they mentioned in the articles here. We added a 3-line function, and now we've got text in a browser. All right. So that's a start. So we've done that. Okay. The next thing we're supposed to do after we stop the run here is we're supposed to come back here. And I'm up to about page 5. In fact, we won't grab this. We will grab it from this. It's much easier to run it from in here. All right. So we just did this, and we ran it. Now we're going to add another controller. So we added a simple home controller that implements the home page. In fact, we didn't add that. That was already available for us. Now let's add another controller that we'll use to implement the browsing functionality. This controller will support the following three scenarios. A listing page of the music genres in the music store, a browse page that lists all the albums for a particular genre, and a details page, which gives you information about a specific genre. So we'll come in here and we'll start by creating a new controller called Store Controller. It's done very simply. We go over to our controllers folder, we right mouse click, we choose add controller, all right, and then I don't remember what type they told us to make this. I think they do want it to be an empty one. says we'll use this. We'll also add 2 additional methods, browse and details. Okay, so we'll add those later. Okay, so again, I'm doing it very by the book, the way the author's doing it here. So we'll create an empty one, add, and we are to call this store controller. Click add. There's our new controller. All right, that's all that's in it. We had more in the other one because the system built it for us. You notice how similar this looks. It's got virtually the same files up here, the same namespace. The controller name is different, but like with home controller, it inherits from controller. And the only method that's in it is this index method. So we want to change that so it looks like this. Now I'm not going to put the other stuff in yet. We will put it in, just not yet. All right, hello from store index. So I'm going to run my program again. And you have to kind of realize as we're going through this stuff, it's just a big series of things that map to other things. We still have that hello from home. Why? Because we're telling it to run the home controller. But if we type in there store, notice it says hello from store index. We could type in store, or we can come in here and type in store/index, and we get the same result. All right. Next, as mentioned on page 7 here, right here, they ask us to come in here and add 2 more methods. All right, right underneath where we are. We hit enter a couple times, and we can't do that while the program's running, Jeff. Hit enter a couple times, paste. I'm also going to hit enter one more time here. All right, so we added 2 new methods, one that says browse and one that says details. All right, so let's take a look at how those things act, react, work, whatever you want to say. So remember, this is running our home controller, so it says hello from home. Boom. We go over to store, and it says hello from store index, or we go over to store index, and it again says hello from store index. But now we also have under store, we've got a browse, which says hello from store browse, and we have a details, which says hello from store details. All right, and that's fine, but as the author mentions in here, if there's a problem, not an error, but a problem, so to speak, right now, all we're doing is we're returning constant strings. There's no interactivity, basically, in this website right now. That's not what you'd want. You would want interactivity. Close these. Gets us back to here. We just did that. So again, this is page 8 of this particular lesson. That's great, but these are just constant strings. Let's make them dynamic so they can take information from a URL and display it in the page output. First, as it says, we're going to change the browse method so it looks like this. Well, what's the difference? All right, I'll tell you how we'll figure that out. Come back in here, and we'll keep our browse method for just a minute. Then we'll paste this one in. Now, we're going to get an error because we've got 2 methods that are called browse. Don't worry about that. All right, probably we'd get an error, but again, I'm not worried about it one way or the other. This is returning a string, but it has nothing passed into it. This is returning a string, but it has a string passed into it. This one says hello from store browse. This one will say store browse genre equals. So if we put a genre in there, it'll include that. So let's remove this. All right, let's put this on the next line just so you can see everything that's in here. All right. Now, the author mentions on the top of page 9 of this particular handout, says, just so you know this, they're using here the HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol utility method that is called HTML encode. And that is being done to do what's called sanitize, or make sure that the user input is clean. That's going to keep you from putting stuff into there as input that you should not be allowed to put in. Okay? All right. So we're going to save this, and we're going to run it again, and we're going to iterate our way over to browse. So we're at home right now, but notice if I say browse and hit enter, it says there's an error. All right. It says, hey, whatever it is you were looking for isn't here. Well, that's because it's not under browse. It's under store browse. Now notice what it says. It looks a little weird. Store.browse, genre equals, and there's nothing there. That's because we didn't provide anything. So what we can do is we can put a question mark here that represents a query string and say genre equal, and they tell you to use disco there and hit enter. Notice the difference. All right, so now it says genre equals disco. All right, so we're done with the browse for now. Again, if you want more on sanitizing that, you can go and you can click on that, on that link and find out more. So we just did this. So let's finish this up now. The author says, let's change the details method so that it reads and displays an input parameter named ID. All right. But this is going to come up with a clearer, or a cleaner, I should say, a cleaner URL. All right. As it says, ASP.NET MVC lets us do this without a lot of work on our part. Its default routing convention is to treat part of the URL as a special parameter named ID. So that's what we're doing. Again, we'll put this in. We'll go back to our code. That's what we just changed on there. But underneath the original one here, it doesn't do much. We'll hit enter and we'll put in our new one. Notice the difference. This new one has an ID passed in where the old one had nothing passed in. All right, so it'll say store.details instead of hello from store.details. It'll say store.details ID equals and whatever ID we pass in. So we're already writing more complex methods. Let's save this. And I want to show you a possible problem with this. Okay, we're still going to get this hello from home because we're running the home controller by default. So we're going to go over to store, and it says hello from store index. We just did the browse. All right, so you saw that. But now we want to put in details. Notice that we get an error. Yeah, I knew we were going to get an error. The reason that we're getting an error is the system was expecting, when we put in details, / some number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice now I don't get an error. But it was expecting you to pass an integer in. When we did the browse, and we didn't pass anything in, we didn't get an error because what it was expecting there was a string. So it just substituted the empty string, which is nothing. But when we put in details and we didn't put anything in there, now we get an error because the empty string is of type string, and that's what got put in there, not a 0 or something else, and that's why we got the error. All right, we're making good progress here. So let's stop this and let's do a save all because we're just about finished with our second lesson here. And as the author says, this is what we've done thus far. We've created a new ASP.NET MVC project. We discussed the basic folder structure, again, the content folder, the controllers folder, the models folder, the views folder, etc. We learned how to run our website. We created a home controller class. Actually, it was already there for us, but we created a store controller. And we added our own. In the store controller, we updated, well, we actually created a browse method and a detail method. And they now respond more dynamically to URL requests. So when we come back for our next one here, we'll be talking about views and view models. I will be back with that third presentation of our 10 shortly.